What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome back to the Dapper Snapper Gaming channel, and welcome back to How Do I Want to Do This? This is our series where we take a look at all playable options available to players in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, then we rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 and either build them or fix them depending on how they rank. Now today we finish up our talks on the Oath of Vengeance Paladin, and this is a really cool one and a really fun one to build. I know a lot of you really like this subclass, and so I am really excited to show you my take on it. Of course, just like with any other build, there's always going to be more than one way to build this. This week, I'm just showing off my version of it, but obviously there are a lot of really cool ways that you can make this happen. So, of course, let me know in the comments what you think about this build that we do today. But before you do that, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. As you can see, most people who watch the channel are not subscribed, so please don't be one of those people. Help us to reach our goal of 5,000 by the end of this year. I think we can do it, but of course, I need your help in order to get there. I think we really can, but again, sharing it with your friends is always going to help, and of course, clicking the bell so you're notified when new videos are uploaded. Now, before we actually do our build today, I have a couple of things that I want to mention. I mentioned this back on Tuesday's video, but this video is kind of pre-recorded and I may not be very active in the comments here for the next little bit. As this is going live, I am likely at the hospital right now. I'm actually expecting the birth of my first child around this time that this is going live. So I will be a little bit indisposed at the moment and for the next little bit. And so I'm trying to make sure that I do not delay any of my videos because of that. So this video is, of course, a little bit pre-recorded, and then next week's videos will still be coming out as normal. And then we'll be taking a little bit of a break after we finish Paladin, and then we'll jump into Ranger once I've slept a little bit. So that's the current plan, just so that everybody knows. And so, let me know in the comments, everything. It really helps out with engagement. It really helps out just with the algorithm and everything like that. You can just say congrats, and that's good enough for me. If you want to support me even further, of course, we also have our memberships. So by going down below and just joining at the bronze level, it's $2 a month. It's very, very little, but it gives you access to all of my build guides that I post for every single one of these subclass builds. Of course, I'm still catching up in my backlog, and that's what I'm going to be taking a lot of the time off when I'm not sleeping. I will be working on getting my backlog caught up a little bit, and so that will all be on there for you. Of course, my variety builds are on there. All of my subclass fix guides are also on there for you, all in a nicely formatted document for you to download, keep, use at your table, anything. And of course, it helps to support me in this very interesting new time in my life. If you would like to support me even further, of course, at the silver tier, you're going to get a shout out each time that we post a video. So there you go. Thank you all to my silver members. And so I really appreciate you going above and beyond there. And of course, every video comes out to you 24 hours early as a silver member. So that's also really cool. Then beyond that, at the gold tier, you get to help me choose variety builds. And I'm also working on a few different things for the gold tier to hopefully come into play shortly after I return from my little break from the channel. So with all that out of the way, thank you all so much to all of my current members. Thank you to all of you who are at least considering it. And of course, thank you to all of you who are just watching this. It really means a lot. Thanks for being here. All right, back to why we're here. The Vengeance Paladin is really easy when it comes to, figuring out a theme, right? It's all combat all the time. We want to deal a bunch of damage. And that's really what I'm going for in this build. Is this the absolute best way to build it? Probably not. I'm sure that there are more effective ways to do this, but this is just a way that I think is very effective, and I think you guys would have a lot of fun with it. I normally prioritize fun and flavor over necessarily power. It's normally kind of a mix in between. This is going to be one of the more powerful ones for sure, but it's just because it's a really strong subclass, as we talked about on Tuesday. Make sure you check that out if you haven't watched that yet. So let's go ahead and start talking about it. What did I decide to do this week? So on a subclass that basically gives you free advantage on a creature for free, pretty much a lot, it's kind of a no-brainer to take a specific feat. And with that specific feat means that we have to meet a specific prerequisite. So of course we're going to be going an elven race this week, and I'm actually choosing to go with a half elf this week, and we're not going to go with the high elf like what we normally do, just because I don't really care about getting a certain thing. Like, we always go and go with that and then pick out a certain spell and find a way, but like, honestly, I don't think that it's that important this week, and I wanted to go with something different because I do that a lot. So we're going with the wood elf this week, the wood elf half elf, and so we're going to be getting a 35-foot walking speed, which I think is pretty cool, right? Being able to be that much more mobile, which is what this subclass really lends itself to, just makes you that much more effective at what you're trying to do. So I don't think that you can possibly see this as a bad thing, getting that extra movement speed out of this, and of course meeting a prerequisite that we will need a little bit later. For our stats, of course, we're going to be using our modified standard array as always. If you have, regular standard array, if you're using point buy, if you're using some other system rolled stats or whatever it is, your stats will look different than mine, and that's okay. You can adjust accordingly at your table. Just follow them in order the same way that I do. So your highest stat is going to go into your charisma, second highest is going to go into strength, third highest into constitution. Beyond that, it really doesn't matter. I went with wisdom, then dexterity, then intelligence. I just go with wisdom saving throws here because wisdom saving throws are going to be somewhat common, right? And so I want to be able to have as effective saving throws as possible with this. Dexterity isn't going to be used for a whole lot. We're just going to have to deal with having a low initiative. And then of course, intelligence, we're barely using for really anything. And then of course, for our bonuses, what's great about a half elf is we get a +2 and 2 +1s. So that feels really good. So of course the +2 going in charisma, and then the +1s going in strength and our constitution. So that feels like a really good place to start. For our equipment, we're going pretty vanilla this week. We're going with a pole arm of your choice. Like always, I prefer a glaive, but it's really up to you. Any pole arm will work just fine. And then, of course, the best heavy armor that you can afford. You're probably going to be taking chainmail for now, and then eventually you'll want to work up to full plate, but that'll be once you've done a bunch of different things and get enough money to afford it. All right, with that out of the way, let's start taking some levels. At level 1, we're going to be a Paladin 1. I really haven't started outside of Paladin much at all this series. I just don't think that there's really a need. Paladin has enough going for it here at level 1. Outside of if you wanted Constitution saving throw proficiency, that's really the only reason why you would start somewhere else. And that's optional. If you wanted to start in fighter, I guess you can. We will be taking some fighter on this build, but I don't know. I just think I would rather start with Paladin here and get some of my really amazing features before I consider going somewhere else, but that's just personal preference. So of course we're going to get Lay on Hands here and Divine Sense. Lay on Hands is of course one of the best healing features in the game because of how you can split up how much healing you're doing when and where, and that's really great. And then Divine Sense of course allows you to see certain types of creatures depending on what is around you and what they are. So that can definitely come into play in the grand scheme as you're going through an actual campaign. That'll definitely come up a few times. Next up, we are already veering off the path at level 2, and so basically at this point something happens, right? And we have a bit of a lapse in judgment here as we look outside of our Paladin ways, which we haven't even taken our oath yet, but we will very soon. And so we're of course taking a Hexblade dip here. We have tried to limit the Hexblade dips as much as possible as we've gone through this series, just because Hexblade works everywhere, but Hexblade works especially well here when we've got a lot that's riding on our charisma being a certain way. And so I felt like it was appropriate to go ahead and do that here. Of course, it gives us Hexblade's Curse and Hex Warrior, so that gives you an expanded crit range on something. It gives you the Hex Warrior, so it allows you to use Charisma instead of Strength or Dexterity for your attack rolls. That's really good, and that's really the key here, right? If you look at the feat that we're getting ready to take, you all know we're going to take Elven Accuracy at some point. If you look at that feat, you will notice that there is a stat that is missing from that. It is the strength stat, right? So we cannot use strength-based attacks in conjunction with Elven Accuracy. So we have to be able to attack with a different stat. And so for some, you know, it might be Shillelagh with the Druid, right? You can attack with your Wisdom instead of something else. You've got now with this Charisma, so we can use that. It works with Dexterity if you're doing something with Versatile. So there are ways, of course, to make use of that, but we need to be able to attack with something other than Strength in order to make use of it. And so here we are. So that's all pretty good. We get our Pact Magic, of course, at this level as well. So we get a couple cantrips. I would probably grab Eldritch Blast and then either Booming Blade or Toll the Dead. It's really up to you. Eldritch Blast is really going to be a quite reliable ranged option for you. Toll the Dead can also be pretty decent, but it's really personal preference. I like Booming Blade a lot here. But that's just me, because it helps you to lock down certain targets, but either one of those will work just fine. Then for first level spells, of course, the shield spell, always going to be a great option for keeping you safe and alive. And then Armor of Agathis is also not too bad for when those hits do make it through. Your melee based attackers will take a little bit of damage from that as well. So that's all pretty good. Now we're leaving Warlock behind. I don't really need anything else from Warlock. We could, of course, go crazy deep into it, but I love Warlock so much that if I go past level 1, I want to take the rest of my levels in Warlock because it's just so fun. So I'm not going to do that. I'm taking 1 and I'm back out. I'm going back to Paladin. Paladin 2, we of course get a fighting style, and I'm going to go with the defense fighting style this time around. Of course, there's always the great weapon fighting style. I just don't think it's good. The way that the math works out is just not great. So I don't know. I don't think it's worth this when I can take defense. Defense is just going to be better and more applicable to me. So that's the way I'm going to go. We've got spellcasting and divine smite there as well for dealing tons of damage. And then of course for our spells, we get Bane and Hunter's Mark come online next level, of course. And then we also get Bless, Command, and the Smite spells. Those are all going to be the big ones that I would recommend. Those are all great options. As far as your concentration spell, it's kind of a toss up here, right? I personally like Bless better than Bane and Hunter's Mark here, even though Hunter's Mark does deal extra damage. And you'll notice I also didn't mention Hex when I was talking about the Warlock list. Of course, you can take that if you want to, and there's nothing wrong with that. But ultimately, it's going to take another bonus action in order to move things around and in order to do all that stuff. And it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense with that, especially once we take another feat a little bit later. It just makes way less sense. And so if you want to use one of those early on, that's fine, but it will become outclassed somewhat soon. So just something to be aware of. At Paladin 3, we get Divine Health and of course our Channel Divinity options here from being a Vengeance Paladin, which is great. So of course we're going to be focusing mostly on Vow of Enmity. So we are going to be able to vow to knock out and absolutely kill this one enemy. And so we have advantage on that creature. And it's fantastic. It's just so good, right? And I can't praise it enough. Obviously, you're limited in how many times a day you can use it, so make sure you use it wisely. But I mean, against a boss creature, this is nasty because you're going to be critting all over the place once you set that up, plus your Hexblade's Curse so that your crit range expands. Yeah, there's just a lot of really good stuff going on with all of this together. Paladin 4, of course, we get our first feat here, and of course Elven Accuracy is going to come online right here. So we are going to not only boost our charisma up to an even number, but we also are going to get access to a third D20 whenever we have access to advantage, which we have incredibly reliably just by saying, yeah, this is my target. So yeah, it's one of the easiest forms of free advantage, and I will never turn it down. At Paladin 5, we get extra attack, and so that's always going to be a good thing. We are never going to complain about getting to attack more than once. We also get access to Hold Person and Misty Step, which are fantastic options for a Paladin. And we also, of course, can take something like Find Steed as a normal second level spell. At this point, it's really personal preference, and I think that the internet at large is kind of divided on this one. So if you look at most people online, which of course I look at other builds when I am building these, and most people would recommend that. Well, most people would recommend that you just go 20 levels into Paladin, which is fair. But I don't do that. I make things complicated because I can. But at this level, most people would say go ahead and go to Aura of Protection at least at Paladin 6, and that makes a lot of sense. Paladin 6 is a really, really good level. It helps you out with all of your saving throws. It boosts all of your allies' saving throws that are near you. It's a huge boon to everybody around you. So it makes a lot of sense. But to me, once I get extra attack, if I am the most selfish person out here, and that's kind of where you are with Oath of Vengeance, right? You're kind of selfish, I would think. You're not really worried about helping out your friends. You're going to be more worried about how many people can I take down and how fast can I take them down. So yeah, that's why we're going to go ahead and go fighter at this level and push off Aura of Protection. Even though it's really good, I'm not saying that it's not good. It's really good, but I am going to push it off a few levels while I go ahead and do this. So at Fighter 1, we are going to get another fighting style here. However, we're going to take a unique one to the fighter, and that is Superior Technique, in order to take Trip Attack. Trip Attack, of course, gives you the ability to possibly knock creatures prone. Of course, our strength isn't terrible here. We still, of course, need at least a 15 in strength in order to wear our heavy armor. And so being able to have a somewhat okay saving throw DC here isn't the worst thing. So I like that, and I think it's going to work a lot of the time. I won't say most of the time probably, but your DC is not going to be terrible. You also, of course, get Second Wind here, and this gives you a nice little bonus action heal. Of course, it's not going to scale all that well. Honestly, I don't know how often you're going to be using this with how little fighter we're going to be taking. But that's kind of, it's there if you don't have anything else to do with your bonus action, but in a couple levels, you'll have everything to do with your bonus action. Of course, at Fighter 2, we get Action Surge, one of the best features in the game. We can take 2 actions instead of 1, which means we can now make 4 attacks in a turn, which is huge. All of them at advantage. So that's great. And so, when I'm thinking about how this subclass works, I'm thinking, how can I make the most attacks possible because they're at advantage, because I have an expanded crit range? How can I make more attacks? Well, I can do this a number of ways. Number one, I can of course do the polearm master strat, right? We can of course take our bonus action to, swing the polearm around and hit with the butt end, or whatever you want to call it, and deal a D4 of damage. But you can also smite on that. You can still add things like Great Weapon Master on there. You can still, add a lot to that damage. But what if we could make another full attack on that bonus action as part of like a Nova or whatever we want to call it? That is where the Echo Knight comes in. Now, of course, Echo Knight is unique to a Critical Role, but it is considered official material. There isn't a ton of stuff by Matt Mercer that's considered official, even though we cover all of the Matt Mercer stuff. Of course, we covered Echo Knight a while ago up in the icon above right there. But this is actually considered to be official material, so it's fully available for us whenever I go to make these builds. So we get Manifest Echo and Unleash Incarnation. So Manifest Echo allows us to, just as a bonus action, create an echo of ourselves just forever. It just lasts however long you want until you tell it to go away. And you get to do a bunch of things with it. But the most important part of that is Unleash Incarnation, which allows you to make an attack as a bonus action from that thing's location. You also can teleport between yourself and that thing. It's just insanely good for everything that we're trying to do with this Paladin. It just doubles down on it and makes it that much better. So I really didn't see a better option here. I normally would recommend something like the Battle Master or the maybe even the Rune Knight, something like that. But I mean, this is just too good. Echo Knight is too good to pass up on at this point. So we now have a way to, yes, it's very limited in how many times we can do it per day, but during maybe a couple of Nova rounds, if we want to, and throw some smites in there, that kind of thing, we can attack on our bonus action full on and just go nuts. And so that feels really, really good to be able to pick that up. With that out of the way, we're going back to Paladin, and we're going to be here for not that long, which is a little weird, and you'll see what I mean. So at this level, of course, we finally get Aura of Protection, which is huge, right? It's huge for our survivability. It's huge for our allies' survivability. They're probably wondering why we waited so long. They're wondering why you're so mean. That's up to you, whatever you want to tell them. But yeah, we're finally taking that, and that helps out a lot. Then at Paladin 7, we get Relentless Avenger. And of course, this is a feature that only works when opportunity attacks happen. Well, that's only when somebody's going to be running away from us, right? Unless we do something to be able to take attacks of opportunity more often. So at Paladin 8, we're taking Polearm Master, and this gives us access to the butt action attack, whatever you want to call it. That gives us access to that whenever we don't have Unleash Incarnation available or just don't want to burn a use of it. This also gives us the ability to make opportunity attacks when someone is entering our range with our polearm, and that's huge, right? This gives us the ability to possibly negate an incoming attack, which is kind of huge, right? So somebody is running into our radius, we can hit them and then back up. And as we back up, maybe they run out of speed on their way in and no more melee attacks for them. That gives you a chance to set stuff up if you need to, and you're going to be in control of positioning at that point. It is no longer the enemy. That's really good. I think that being able to do that in a reactive way is great. This allows you to have more of a positional advantage at any given time, and it keeps you from having to worry about using, your Misty Steps for using up spell slots. Those are going to be used for smites a lot of the time when we are blowing everything on a Nova round, right? So I don't know. I think that it's good to be able to have that, even though there is a little bit of a double up here. I do think that it's worth it. And if we're taking Paladin 8, we got to take Paladin 9 because we, of course, don't pick up any features, but we get haste. And so now we are switching our concentration over to haste. Haste is an amazing spell, gives you an entire extra attack. It boosts your AC. It's just amazing. Of course, there's a ton of drawback if you end up getting broken out of that concentration while you're doing that. But we don't worry about that. It's fine. It's fine. Honestly, like it is really nasty and can be bad, but it's so worth it, right? It's never not going to be worth it to me. So you also get protection from energy, and then for third level spells, honestly, just pick your favorite. It really doesn't matter. I'm using haste, so pick up whatever feels right at that point. So now that we've got that, I want to divert one more time. And we again discover that we have some power within us here, and we're going to take a level in Sorcerer. Now, Sorcerer level here does a couple of things. Number one, we get favored by the gods, and favored by the gods as we go Divine Soul, of course, is going to give us a bonus on that Nova round. If for some reason we roll really trash, if you're like me and roll trash a lot, well, at least I do, I roll trash all the time, then favored by the gods is going to really help you out, right? So that feels really good. On top of that, we of course get some other spells which feel really good. I'm more so here for the first level spells than the cantrips, but there are some great cantrips on this list. Shocking Grasp can be really good, of course, preventing any kind of opportunity attacks or other reactionary effects. That can be really good. You also get things like Firebolt. So if you want another extra, ranged option, again, I'm probably sticking to Eldritch Blast, but it's up to you. Prestidigitation is a nice little utility thing. And of course, there are plenty of others that you want. If you didn't take Booming Blade earlier, you could always take that now if you wanted to, but completely optional. But I'm here mainly for the first level spells, and those are Absorb Elements and Silvery Barbs. Silvery Barbs, of course, is going to help keep you safe and give advantage to some allies around you. And of course, Absorb Elements allows you to deal more damage back when you take damage of certain types and gives you a little bit of a resistance to it as well. So a lot of really good stuff there in that one level of Sorcerer. Technically, it's optional. You don't have to, but as I was looking through it, I was like, I could either get another level of Warlock in there, or I could take one more level of Sorcerer. I guess I could have taken a 4th level in Fighter to get another ASI, but I don't know. I just feel like 1 level in Sorcerer is really good for what we want here. Then we go back to Paladin, and we're going to stick there the rest of the way. A Paladin 10, Aura of Courage. This is going to help us out a lot with the fear effect. If something is trying to frighten us or our allies, you can just say not anymore. So shut up, go away. It's not working out. At Paladin 11, we've got improved Divine Smite. So that's just free damage. No drawback. It's just free extra damage. All good there. At Paladin 12, this is our chance to finally take a single ASI on this whole build. And we're not going to take it. We're taking Great Weapon Master. I don't care. I just need so many feats here that I'm taking them all. This boosts our damage even further on top of everything else that we have done. And it just feels really good to be able to deal even more damage, even if we did have to wait until pretty much the very end. At Paladin 13, we don't get any features, but we do get our 4th level spells. We get Banishment and Dimension Door. Again, those are both really great. I'm still going to be concentrating on haste at this point. So if you want something else, that's fine, go for it. But that's what I'm going to be focusing on personally. And then of course, Paladin 14, Cleansing Touch, that allows you to end certain spells on yourself, which can be really good situationally. And finally, level 15, we get our Soul of Vengeance, which is our final subclass feature that we're going to be getting on this build. And of course, this allows you to make an attack as a reaction, kind of like the Sentinel feat, but doesn't necessarily have to target someone else. It can target you. So, you know, that's one thing that's kind of interesting, is you get that attack of opportunity when they're coming in. And so that can be really nice. But if they are still within, once all of that is resolved for whatever reason, if they had just enough, and so you can't make another opportunity attack, you can catch it on the next turn. Once you get your reaction back and they go to make an attack against you, you get another free attack. So there's a lot going on here that can work out really nicely, just depending on how it all works. And that's really the whole point of this build, is to give you options when it comes to mobility. And then once you're in position, to just wail on one creature until it just stops fighting back. So what do you think of today's build? I really like this one. I think it's a lot of fun. I think you're going to deal a lot of damage. You've got a ton of different movement options. You've got a lot to do on a bonus action, which isn't the most common thing for a paladin. And so it feels really, really good. This is one of my more like favorite builds. I think this is a lot of fun. As far as honorable mentions go, though, let's go ahead and talk about some of those. For other races, I would love to take, of course, Variant Human and Custom Lineage. I don't normally mention this in honorable mentions, but I will say that I do think that this is the best race for something like this, because Vengeance really does need a lot of feats. Now, of course, if your table allows you to play Custom Lineage and it is an Elven lineage that qualifies for Elven accuracy, that's what I would do over the Half Elf, because that is worth it to me. However, I don't assume at any table that that's how that works, because I don't believe that's technically rules as written or intended. That's just the way that I interpret the rules personally. But if for some reason at your table you can take Custom Lineage and it qualify you to be an elf for the sake of taking Elven accuracy, do that, because that is going to net you so much more than what this could, because then you can go ahead and take Elven accuracy at level 1, then Polar Master comes earlier, Great Weapon Master comes earlier, and then you can possibly take an ASI or possibly another feat that we're going to mention here in just a second. It just frees all of that up. So talk to your DM if you're wanting to do something like that. And then as far as something besides that, something a little more exciting, the Orc from the Monsters of the Multiverse or the Half Orc are both really good other options. They, of course, deal a lot of damage. They have really good survivability with relentless endurance. There's a lot going on here. It gives you yet something else to do with your bonus action on the normal orc. So there's a lot going on here, and I think that it works out really well. So definitely consider that. For other feats here, I would definitely consider the Warcaster feat. We're going to have our hands full here, so that isn't great. You could also Booming Blade as your opportunity attack, which feels really good. All of that works really, really well for you. The Slasher feat is, of course, also going to be really, really good here for slowing down enemies so that they can't quite get to your allies or get away or whatever it is. You've got a lot of mobility on this build, so that really helps out a lot in the grand scheme. So I really like that. And then finally, for other classes that we could have multi-classed into, of course, we mentioned this briefly, but the fighter, of course, going into Rune Knight or Battle Master, both of those subclasses are fantastic, but getting an extra attack on that bonus action was really the kicker. And so that's why we went with the Echo Knight this time around, but both of those are fantastic. Then finally, I also was looking at the Swords Bard or the Whispers Bard. The Whispers Bard gives us a little bit more of a like sneak attack, like burst type of thing. So definitely consider that if you wanted to be a little bit more supportive of your allies and not so selfish. And then Swords Bard, of course, gives you some really fancy maneuvers that you can use, and those can also be really nice. So that's our build for the day. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Of course, next week we continue on with our Oath of the Watchers Paladin. And I mentioned this a little while ago that I didn't think that it was anybody's favorite. I want to apologize for that comment because I got some comments saying that, you know, Oath of Watchers is actually my favorite. I really like Oath of Watchers. And you know what? It's going to get a fair shake whenever I go to do my ranking next week. I'm not going to be biased for or against it, and we're just going to have to see where it lands. It's new, so a lot of people aren't familiar with it just yet, and that's probably where a lot of that comes from. But we're going to give it a fair shake next week and see what happens with it. So of course, make sure that you are subscribed so that you don't miss when all of that goes live. Our next battle for the SSBA Pokemon Draft League goes live on Sunday, and I hope to see you guys there as well. Until next time, stay safe out there, stay healthy. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.